All right, nerds, we've got James Treakle on. Last time we had him on, we were talking about different ads. I think it was for the Yang presidential campaign. He's been busy since then, working on a documentary about Jermaine Johnson. But before we get into that, let's have Andrew himself warm us up.
Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the gang gang. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the gang gang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Shit, dude, that may make the next version of our trailer. That's probably the most aggressive one I've heard in a while. Fantastic. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Let's start with like life after the campaign and the election in general. Like, what's your view on the state of America?
Things are interesting. Thanks, Kim. Last time I undersold it, so I wanted to oversell it this time. You know? I was told by some people that like, oh man, I was disappointed, didn't really go for it, so I had to make up for it.
Well, you made up for it this time, my friend.
Anyway, so America is I don't know. I feel like we're doing okay. Like it's kind of feels weird to say that because we've been through a lot. I mean, just 6 months ago, that long election week, which we weren't quite sure how things were going to pan out.
God, yeah.
And then that weird interim period when Trump was still in office, but he had lost and he kept trying to overturn things. He kept hilariously failing, and just and of course January 6th. So it's been a wild ride.
Seriously,
we're here. We're still standing. That's all that matters.
Seriously, I mean, if you are a political junkie, this past year has been incredibly interesting. And I was just watching the Jimmy Kimmel interview of the My Pillow CEO from a few days ago. I mean, there's still definitely, I think I saw a poll saying 50% of Republicans think that President Trump still think that he really won, even after the insurrection and everything like that.
Yeah,
it's crazy, right? Yeah,
man. Yeah, I don't even know how we really begin to disentangle that. It's gonna take some time.
Now, he has been kind of quiet, Trump himself. Do you think he'll remain a force, sort of the intellectual leader of the Republican Party?
It's hard to say. I feel like at this point he's still so fresh in the minds of so many Republicans. They can't. I think nobody really knows what the Republican Party is supposed to look like post-Trump, and there's no apparent charismatic leader to like take his spot. I mean, some people have been talking about DeSantis, and you have your Cruz and your Hollies, and I feel like Tim Scott is kind of being put out there as being we've got our own black guy, which like honestly, it's like that's kind of the optics that they're using a little bit around him, which, to be fair to Tim Scott, I actually think that he's got some decent policy proposals. So I don't want to, be unfair to him on that level. But I do think that there is kind of a grasping for an angle. They're not sure what angle they want to use to move forward. And I think in the absence of that angle, Trump is kind of filling the space with his aura. And as soon as somebody else, whether it's Tim Scott or somebody else, kind of really steps up to the plate and says, I'm going to run, I want to lead the party, I think Trump will become irrelevant. Because typically in the past, and we've seen this, with Bush in particular, there's this tendency among the Republican Party that your losers get thrown under the bus. Well, Romney too. Like Romney is kind of in this, now they kind of consider him like a Republican in name only. even though he's very much a Republican, because
Seriously.
he lost. Losers are lame.
Yeah.
Losers get penalized politically within the Republican Party. So Trump, that will apply to him too. Even though there's still a large chunk of people that don't think that he actually lost. I think deep down people feel like he's a loser, because when you have all this conspiracy world that's saying that he's like, you know, omnipotent and he should be able to take down the deep state and take down Biden, and he couldn't.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter if the election was actually stolen from him. He still lost in the sense that he was removed from power.
Right. He was weak.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, I have a brother who's big MAGA guy, and he was legitimately shocked that Trump didn't send in like the military and use martial law. And I was like, are you serious that you thought that was really going to happen? And he's like, oh yeah, we all thought, because he and I guess a lot of MAGA people, they get their news and their discussions from, you know, they don't subscribe to Nerds for Humanity or watch, you know, Meet the Press or CBS News or 60 Minutes. They get their information from different sources, and they are really convinced. I mean, my MAGA brother was also convinced for quite some time that that COVID was some sort of, you know, Antifa conspiracy to make Trump look bad. And even today, he's like, well, it's so weird why all these people are dying in India. I was like, what do you mean it's weird? It was we've been talking about this for a year. But you know, it's like a different reality. Everybody has their, maybe they say the same thing about us. Like, oh, look at these snowflakes wearing their masks, you know, getting vaccinated.
Definitely. No, it is definitely what they say about us. I feel like, you know, I've been on both sides of the line, you know, growing up conservative. And so, yeah, they are very different worlds, unfortunately.
So what, you know, one thing that's also interesting, the politically, I feel like Biden has exceeded a lot of people's expectations.
Yeah.
Even within the Democratic Party, there were a bunch of really pro-Yang people who were so convinced that Biden would do zero to help people. Or we had the sort of MAGA, the kind of Trump supporters who were briefly pro-Yang, who were convinced that Kamala Harris was going to take over the government on the second day. And I don't think either of those things have happened. I think the COVID stimulus was a very aggressive move. The infra plan is very bold. This, you know, so it seems like Joe Biden's not waiting around. Like, he's actually making stuff happen. What do you think?
I've been very impressed myself. I mean, it's been, in a very short period of time, they've accomplished a lot. The vaccine program ramping up from being almost non-existent in terms of the plan. I mean, we do have to give the previous administration at least a certain amount of credit that there was some push, but there wasn't a federally administered plan to actually get the vaccines out to people. And they changed that literally overnight. As soon as they got the Biden administration in, they were like, okay, what do we need to do? Let's go. And the impact of that in terms of saving lives really can't be overstated.
Yeah.
And that alone is incredible. And then you include the COVID relief bill, you include all the other executive action, which has been very important as well in terms of restoring trans rights and other human rights issues. And then also climate, a big issue for me and for a lot of other people was the abuses of people at the border. And basically those border detention facilities are being emptied by thousands every day. And that I expected them to do something. I didn't expect them to get down to less than 1,000 people left in detention. I think it's kids that are left in detention by now. And all those kids that they've moved out are now in housing. And that's incredible. I really didn't expect them to be like, okay, we're going to start solving this problem immediately. Find places for people to actually stay, not just be sleeping on a concrete floor. And that, I mean, honestly, I'm getting emotional about it because that is a promise that's being kept, and it's something that has been, I think, at like the top of people's minds since Trump took office, because it was what we were afraid was going to happen, and then it happened. He really did. You know, it thankfully never really evolved into being like true like ethnic cleansing or something like that, but it had shades of that. It was close to that in the way that he was treating people coming across the border. And to see those things be so rapidly reversed is just, it gives me a lot of hope that we can do a lot of good, even if, you know, we don't keep our majority in 2022. He is making the most of his time now, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah. Remember when he was called Sleepy Joe? And they were saying he's hiding in his basement. He's not going to do anything.
Oh, man.
Right?
Yeah.
Hiding in his basement, and nobody's showing up at his rallies. He won't get any bills passed. Nobody supports. How can anybody vote for him? It must have been stolen. It turns out, like, dude is making stuff happen. I will say, it seems like it will be a very tricky puzzle to solve, this border situation and immigration in general. For sure, agree, more humane treatment is kind of like table stakes. But then I do think he needs to figure out, like, what can we do to be humane and inclusive, but also, you know, maintain, you know, control and have order and process.
Yeah.
Because you look at some of these Central American countries and they are struggling so much economically and with climate change. And, you know, sooner or later, maybe even COVID-19 kind of surges on their side.
For sure.
Then you wonder, like, okay, well, we can't house everybody. So how does this go down? And, you know, that's a hard one.
It's a hard one. It's a no-win scenario for him because, you know, in the long term, that is, because I think in the short term, they're doing a lot of good. They're reversing the outright, you know, abuses, but there does need to be something done to try to create, you know, a sustainable equilibrium at the border, because there's always going to be border crossings, illegal or otherwise, and there's always going to be some need for enforcement, but it doesn't have to look like what we were doing. And so, yeah, I think it's an open question. It's something that will probably be wrestled with for many years, decades, even after Biden's gone. So, you know, who knows? I do think it's like many other things. It's like foreign policy, you know, and in many cases, you know, it really is a foreign policy thing because it's dealing with, you know, the issues that Central American countries are having, and that's why so many people are fleeing here.
Yeah.
Is that there's no one right answer that would satisfy, you know, pundits or people on the internet, and it's tricky. It's like the Afghanistan situation, really, because I've heard some good arguments for why we should stay. And I'm very much pro leave, like get out of Afghanistan. We spent 20 years there. It's time to pack it up. But, you know, every action has consequences, you know, intended or otherwise. And even if it's the right thing to do politically, and maybe the right thing to do for the military to say, all right, we've done as much as we can. It's not possible, short of just making Afghanistan a state, to just stay there forever. Like, you have to move on. And so no matter what happens out of that situation, you're going to have people saying that, like, Biden obviously made the wrong choice, etc. And, you know, I think you just have to absorb the blow. You have to have the kind of courage of your convictions to say, like, hey, you know, I'm just making my best call, and maybe history will condemn me. Maybe history will vindicate me, and I'll just do my best.
He's definitely, it seems like he's taking I'm going to make big decisions. I'm going to try and push through priorities that I have conviction around, and I'll leave the whole Twitter drama and the name calling stuff to other people.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice to have a president that isn't spending so much time on Twitter, frankly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about how many hours a day Trump probably spent on Twitter. It's crazy.
I don't know about you, but like my psychology has like improved since Trump was
Yeah.
banned, because it's like he just took up so much space
Yeah.
being on Twitter. And of course, I'm a Twitter addict. And so
Yeah.
being on this platform all the time, in which the psychopath who happens to be the leader of the free world is just saying whatever crazy stuff comes into his head while he's on the toilet.
Yeah.
It was bad. I mean, basically we were stuck in a house with a crazy person for 4 years, and that was awful. Let's not do that again. Let's never do this again.
I mean, it was one of those terrible things where like you couldn't look away because you wanted to know, like, well, what is the leader of this country thinking? But on the other hand, it was obviously very frustrating. And you see folks like I feel like Lauren Boebert is trying to fill those shoes. Like she's really trying to stoke a lot of the division and anger and kind of like grievance that was like emblematic of the MAGA, the kind of radical MAGA movement. But I feel like she may not be getting that much traction. Like, look, let me show you. I was just, this is funny. This is her right now, basically saying to her followers, this administration is truly a disgrace, one of Trump's favorite words. How could they deny our veterans? And so this is about a parking permit for AmVets. And, you know, it's like clearly this culture war, right? Of like, oh, those Democrats, they hate veterans. They're probably burning the flag as we speak. And, you know, in fairness to her, like she has generated, you know, I mean, way more of influence, 600,000 followers, way more influence than you would expect from a first-time congressional representative from Colorado that, you know, hasn't really passed a lot of legislation or got much done. But that's her whole shtick, right? Her and MJT, like their whole job is to stoke anger and fear and resentment and sort of grievance. It's like the opposite of Yang.
Right. Yeah. Which I think in terms of the Yang New York race is causing a lot of people are kind of losing their minds over the fact that he won't engage them like that. Like there's no tit for tat. He never punches back in the way that they want him to. They're trying to provoke him by saying outrageous stuff about him in the press or on Twitter, and he won't take the bait, and they have no idea what to do about that.
Yeah, and I think when Adams said, when Adams said people like Andrew Yang have never worked a day in their life. I mean, if I were Yang, I would be like, oh, you know, I would probably get a little hot under the collar, let's just say. And you know, credit to him for rising up and just sort of staying on, you know, staying on the high ground.
Yeah. I remember his reply to that was very like direct, but it didn't. It felt like firm and being like, "Come on." Yeah. And in a lot of ways, I think that this is something that Yang and Biden have in common, and I actually think that Yang is better at it. But you know, Biden has that, and I think it served him well in the debates with Trump, where it's just kind of like, "Come on, man!" Like, you know, like that's malarkey. Like, you know, it's sort of like grounding force here. And I think helps explain a lot of Yang's popularity now, which I'm glad that it's sort of mainstreaming in a way, which is also driving certain people crazy because they don't want him to be a part of their club, but he's clearly, you know, he's got this energy to him that, as we know from being early adopters, is really infectious. Wants you to be involved, and it feels like a good kind of energy it's political in the sense that obviously he believes in certain things very strongly, and that's part of why so many people will support him. But you can support him even if you don't believe in everything that Yang believes. And that is like what really freaks some of these people out, because they're so used to like, okay, you subscribe to my very specific credo. So you'll roll with me because you subscribe to my political religion. And Yang doesn't really have a political religion. He does have values that are consistent, but he's willing to adapt his policies to try to best fit those values. And I think a lot of politicians don't do that. They struggle, at the very least, with how to do that. And Yang just isn't crippled by whatever those considerations are that are holding people back. And it's just surreal seeing the contrast now, where that force that we liked so much when he was a fringe candidate is still there when he's this leading candidate. And it's just causing all this consternation. It's I have to say the Schadenfreude of this is like really enjoyable for me. Like I just seeing the panic from some of these machine politicians. It just brings me a lot of joy. Whether he wins or loses, I'm enjoying the process. So
they definitely seem befuddled and really frustrated and kind of just upset that this person like came out of the Matrix and he's just like bending backwards and all their bullets are just going past by him. And they're like, what the hell? Who is this guy? So yeah, good for him. I mean, when you heard that he was running for mayor, what was or thinking about it, what was your take?
I was supportive but skeptical. I wanted him to be in the Biden administration, to be honest. And, so that way he was staying on like the federal government track. But I did see that there was, some virtue to running for a more provincial office, because it, especially with New York, it's still giving him a national platform and it builds credibility for his future political career. But obviously being the mayor of New York is a really difficult job. And it's a job that's kind of like a no-win scenario because it's such a big city. But also maybe that helps prepare you to be president, because no matter what you do as president, people are going to love and hate you. So I don't know. I still kind of have mixed feelings about that direction. Just I think part of it is just that like I like Yang and I kind of feel protective of Yang. And so seeing what he's going through is a little bit rough at times. But just the fact that he's not like stuck in the middle of the pack or like trailing behind, but actually winning is really refreshing for me. So on balance, I'd say it's been the right move, and it's probably the right move for the movement that we've been trying to build around him, because even if he doesn't take it all the way, as long as he places well, this will give a lot of energy, a lot of hope for other candidates like Yang that are trying to come up behind him. So,
yeah, totally agree. I will be the first to admit that I was way off when I heard he was thinking of running. I was like, no, don't do that. Try and get a plum assignment in the Biden administration, and that's going to give you all these benefits.
Right.
And I thought, like, mayor of New York, that's not a easy race to win, and it's a tough neighborhood. And I'm so pleasantly surprised how well he's doing in the polls. And even though the media coverage is kind of, a little bit, skewed against him and making up stuff, like, kind of emphasizing small things, I'm so glad that he's getting coverage. Remember?
Right. Yes.
When they wouldn't even used to say his name. It's so crazy.
Oh man. I saw somebody complaining that he was getting free coverage from the press, and I just laughed my ass off, because it's like, you have no idea how hard this guy had to work just to get any press at all. Oh man. Because, for like 2 years, he was totally blacked out. And to go from that to having this platform that, right, exactly. I think that's it. Is that like they were supposed to anoint, whoever is supposed to be the next mayor, and somehow he managed to get into first place without being anointed. And then it's just like, the whole idea of like, well, if we just treat him as if he doesn't exist, he'll just, be totally invisible to people. Didn't work. It didn't work. It failed. If anything, it actually fueled more interest, because the whole alternative media picked him up. I mean, I still think about those YouTube numbers from like the debates,
Mm-hmm.
Like early on in the 2020 presidential primary debates, where it's just like, okay, Kamala gets like 1 million views for her talking points. Here's
Right.
Bernie. Bernie gets, a good number of views, like 10 million views. Yang gets
Mm-hmm.
like 50 million views. And it's just like several times greater than any other candidate. And, that didn't translate into votes, but it did translate into interest. And now it might actually translate into votes in New York. And that's wild. Is that like it just took time for people to kind of build up this like sense of, interest in and respect for Yang as a person and as a politician. And that has carried through. And that's what I was hoping for. And so glad to see it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it seems like we are in the home stretch. I mean, I think the mayoral primary is in early June. So we only got about 6 weeks. And,
Not fast.
fingers crossed, unless, hopefully nothing crazy happens. But I mean, that is one thing in that the challengers are still kind of, they're still split. And you wonder if there will be a grand kind of alliance by all of the kind of inside New York City politics candidates who've been kind of part of the system for so long, if they just pick a name and then all try and converge. Because while Yang's number one, it's not like he has, he has like 20% or some thereabouts. It's not insurmountable for sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You think he'll do it? You think he'll pull it off?
I am a bit worried about the machine politics and just the way that they could rally. But the fact that Yang is leaning at all is already a Stranger Things,
it is so weird,
have happened kind of scenario. And so I think, I would say that the odds are pretty good that he's going to win, which is really a different feeling. It's like, I almost feel like hesitant to even say that at all, because I'm so used to like Yang just being the obvious
permanent underdog.
And like, oh, sure, like Yang could theoretically win. And like, that was the argument that we were always making. It's like, well, if you look at, what's going on here, there is a path to victory. It's slim, but it's possible. But we're not making that argument anymore. Now we're saying that like, well, Yang's opponents, they have a path to victory. It's slim, but it's possible. So just do something on their foot.
It's so weird.
I can't count them out still. They could still win, especially because of the ranked choice voting dynamic. There's other things at play here than an ordinary primary, since it isn't winner take all. We'll see what happens there.
The good news is I think he does well as a number 2 for a lot of people who didn't put him as their number 1. So he's got pretty broad, like, people are generally favorable towards him, because he is who he is. And so fingers crossed. I mean, then of course the challenge will be, if he wins, it's not like New York is working perfect and he just needs to kind of hang out. Like he's got a lot of work to do, and he's got a big UBI pilot, $1 billion pilot to try and pull off.
Right.
That ain't no small project.
Yeah, he's I honestly feel more concerned about that than I do about his prospects of winning. Yeah. Because once he gets in there, he still has to deal with the machine. It's just that now he's in charge of it, and they're still not going to be totally happy with him. And so he's going to have to kind of fight him, which is honestly, though, why I don't begrudge him the fact that he's like worked with a lot of these kind of like political insider types in running this campaign, because he's trying to build relationships with people that will hopefully translate across into his actual mayoral term. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, you have to play the game. It's like politics is dirty. You have to play the game. You have to build relationships, even with people that aren't like, Tuck's strategies is kind of shady, but they do get shit done. And if your goal in politics is to get shit done, you have to work with people who also do that. And hey, they're helping him win. And if that helps us get UBI running in a major city, then that's huge. Yeah. And, over and above that, if it leads to other candidates like Yang popping up in more places, even better. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm still cautious about a lot of this stuff for all the reasons that we've discussed. But I'll say I'm trending optimistic, which, you know, it's a nice feeling after 4 years of being kind of beaten down.
Yeah. It's sort of like, you know, you're used to rooting for this football team that's never been in that top tier, and all of a sudden people are like, well, that's the team to beat, and you're like, huh, that's my team. So
right.
This is strange. So let's talk a little bit about the Jermaine Johnson documentary. When we interviewed Andrew on this channel, the first interview we did with him after he suspended the presidential, he had mentioned that he was going to start endorsing people, and Jermaine was the first name he actually said publicly. And that's kind of funny how that happened. I don't think that was like a planned thing. And then Jermaine tweeted at me saying, what happened? I heard that I got endorsed. So I was like, yeah, man, he said it on the nerd zone. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your project with Jermaine, or about Jermaine.
So my business partner and I, Adam Bailey, we had started our company, Mark Finder Media, and we were doing a bunch of political ads during the election season. And Jermaine approached us to do an ad for him. And so we did, and you know, he loved it, did really well.
Didn't hurt.
He won his race. And he had mentioned offhand, like, oh, I kind of want to do this documentary. And we were like, oh, I mean, we've done documentaries, sure. And we kind of didn't really talk about it more for a while. And then we circled back to him and we're like, hey, so about that documentary project, like, what were you thinking? He said, like, oh, I've been having this guy, Darren, follow me around during my campaign and record. And we're like, oh, okay. So you already have footage. And it's not a ton of footage, but it is certain key moments during the campaign. And when we saw that, we're like, oh, well, okay, well, let's try to build something out of this and see what we can make. And originally the idea was to just make a short film. And as we got into it and we started to talk to him more about his life, because we did this Zoom interview with Jermaine, in which was just like, okay, you know, tell us about your background, etc. So it was over the course of 2 nights, and he had us in tears. Like, his life story is so powerful. All the things that he's gone through, all the challenges he's overcome. Jermaine he's the American dream. Yeah. And
did you manage to get a hold of that basketball coach he talked about? That sort of was almost a father figure.
He's one of the people that we want to talk to. Yeah. And, you know, if we get everything that we hope and dream for from this documentary, we're going to talk to a lot of people from his life. He's on the list.
That's cool.
But we were so moved by this that we were like, no, this needs to be a feature film. Like, we need to just go for it and make this, you know, a fully fleshed out story. And so, you know, of course, Jermaine was like, cool, yeah, I'm down for whatever you guys want to do. And so then we started to poke around and develop a story for it, and we felt very strongly about it. We've been talking to investors, and we've been developing a plan for it. And the next step for us, because, you know, with independent film is a catch-22, especially in the documentary world. To get investors, you kind of need to show them what you've got.
Yeah.
And in order to show them what you've got, you need to raise some money, so that way you can go shoot some things. So that's why we're running an Indiegogo campaign to raise enough funds to go out there to South Carolina from Austin and shoot a bunch of stuff with Jermaine, and then turn that around and be like, hey, investors, here you go. This is what it's going to look like, and get more people on board. And this is a process I've been through before on a previous documentary that I worked on as the editor and co-producer. And I think we talked about this last time. It's called Juice, How Electricity Explains the World. And similar thing, where the production went and they shot a bunch of stuff, and they went and got more money, and then they shot a bunch more stuff and they got more money. And, you know, by the time that it was done, you know, they had raised, you know, enough money to actually fund the whole project and get everything done. But, you know, it's an incremental thing. A documentary can take a while to make. But this is our first shot across the bow, and we get this, you know, well-funded. Then we will shoot a bunch of stuff and grow it from there, grow it from that seed.
Yeah, so that's an interesting model. It sounds like you're kind of gonna put together almost like a prototype that gives a little bit of a amuse bouche for what this thing could become.
Right, exactly.
And then that's good. How much do you need to raise to build the prototype, and then how much will you need to raise to do the full length film?
So the full length film, we have a budget which I won't disclose, but it's pretty decent. Like it's one of those budgets that like feels like a lot of money to me because I'm used to working in the micro budget space, but it's still half of what Juiced cost. But we're not traveling around the world. I mean, who knows? We might, because Jermaine traveled around the world, so we might end up going to a couple places, but not as many as Juiced did. But I digress. But the budget that we need in order to get out there and get everything that we want the way that we want it is $10K. So far, we've raised almost $4. And we've got a little over 2 weeks left. And generally, the way that crowdfunding works, you get a big amount of money at the beginning, practically nothing in the middle, and a bunch of money at the end. So that's what we're trying to raise awareness going into those last 2 weeks, because we're going to use that deadline, try to leverage as much funding as we can. And there it is.
Yeah. Looks like you've got 82 backers, about a couple weeks left, 37% of the way there. And what do the supporters get anything for being an early angel investor in this project, or is it, just you want to see the project get done, so pitch in what you can?
Well, you get a few things. A lot of campaigns will do stuff like T-shirts, etc. But honestly, it costs about as much to make a single T-shirt and send it out as it does to have the fund delivered for that tier or what have you. So what we're doing is all digital, and it's you get a copy of the film, you get a copy of the soundtrack when it's done, and you also get access to our production diaries while we're making it. So basically, we make you an insider on the production. So starting in June, when we go out there to shoot, we'll have regular updates and be able to see what we're doing. And we'll walk you through the process, which, I mean, filmmaking is kind of a cool process to be a part of, just to watch how the sausage gets made. And we'll kind of bring in whoever wants to see how that's being developed in real time. And you can see how the story comes together.
What about credits at the end of the film, or at the end of the prototype?
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be credits at the end of the film as well. So yeah, everybody who donates gets their name in the credits. You will live forever along with the film. Will
it be at the end of the sort of prototype film, or if it actually makes it to the full length, do you get also in the big one?
Yeah, in the big one. And that's the perk that we're offering, is that you're going to get the full film.
Yeah.
Because basically we're going to make this film, whether we get to do it exactly the way that we want to do it coming up in June or not. I mean, we're working with, people that are helping us, raise like real money through nonprofits, etc. But all that stuff is down the road. We just need like a showcase to show them. And this will kind of help us get to that point in which we can raise the real money, because we're going to have a really kick-ass, hopefully probably 20 minutes to show people of the film and be like, hey, see, we already shot a bunch of it. Isn't that great?
Yeah. Do you think you're going to
happen?
Will you get Jermaine's help in terms of access to interviewees and things like that? Is he supportive of the project?
Oh, yeah. Jermaine is intimately involved in the project. Technically, what we're doing is we're licensing his story from him, because he's actually written a book, which isn't published yet, that's got the title I Got Myself a Yard. And when we heard that title, we're like, oh, that's a kind of a cool title. I like that. It's evocative. And the story behind that is that when he was mowing his lawn this one day, he had a couple of kids. He had just moved into his first house, and it was a really hot day, and he was just like, oh my God, I'm sweating, I'm dying out here, and it's just blistering hot. He takes off his shirt, and he's just like swearing and losing his mind over like how much bullshit it is that he has to cut his grass on a day like today. And then it just dawns on him like, wait, I got myself a yard. What am I complaining about? Like coming from his background where he literally grew up on the streets in LA, and there were times in which like he and his friends would like cook hot dogs over candlesticks just to have something to eat in a motel. Like that's his background, to go from that to like, I'm a homeowner with my own family, with my own yard. I have no cause to complain. And that like that emotional moment, that realization is kind of like the emotional core of the film. This finding a place to belong is what Jermaine's quest is really about, because he went through a lot to get there. And really that's kind of the basis of his politics, is why he's so supportive of UBI, is trying to help other people also find their place to belong. And having a universal policy that lifts up everybody is one of those ways that we can help other people get there.
When do you think we'll see him running for federal office?
I wouldn't count it out.
Yeah.
In conversations with him, I mean, he wants to keep going. He's got a lot of good that he wants to do.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
He definitely seems like someone to keep an eye on, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Seems like I've talked with him a couple times, and he has a very positive energy to him as well. And yeah, so I'll be excited to, well, I'll for sure check out the Indiegogo campaign. I'll probably chip in what I can. It's not going to help you. You're not going to hit your goal with it with me, but you'll get closer.
That's all that matters. Any dollar counts. I mean, honestly, even just having a certain number of backers is a good calling card for our next round of funding. Because we'll be like, hey,
that's a good point.
We had this number of people support us, and
right.
So
Yeah,
that counts too. Yeah.
If you're watching this on replay, I'll put a link in the description. And then if you're live now, I'm going to paste it into the live chat, the Indiegogo link, or you can Google Jermaine Johnson Indiegogo. That was the first result that came up. So tell me a little bit about where you think the Democratic Party is going. What are your thoughts? I mean, I remember when Biden was running, I was like, well, surely he'll be a transitional president. He'll kind of just take us out of crazy town, and we'll just be, back into like a more normal world. But I don't know. I mean, if dude keeps getting stuff done and he wants to run again, like, gee, I don't know. Maybe a second term is not crazy. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I feel like things are too uncertain to really say. And this is interesting because it's both parties, I feel like, are kind of in that same boat.
Yeah.
Like, what is the future of politics? I mean, like, we're not really sure. And that's maybe a good thing, because we're kind of coming out of this really tumultuous era. And maybe in the next couple of years, we'll have a lot more clarity about what's going on and what we can build. I do think that the Democratic Party has a lot of heat behind it, and that's only going to increase. And I'm concerned about the gerrymandering that they're up against in 2022 and some of the kind of usual political cyclical backlash that you get. But I do think that the Republicans are kind of making a mistake by doubling and then tripling and quadrupling down on the culture war, especially a lot of this anti-trans bigotry kind of stuff that they're doing, because that's going to keep the Democratic base activated and angry. And people are not going to take that stuff, lightly. They're not going to take it lying down. They are going to get up and fight. And I think that bodes well for the future. We've got a lot of young people that are more politically active than they were before. Obviously, we saw record numbers of people vote in the previous election. I honestly wonder if we'll see another record set in the next one. I mean, it depends on how high the stakes are. This election was a referendum on Trump. If Trump isn't part of the picture, it might have, a lower turnout, but it really depends on how people feel about the issues and what's really at play. And I think if the Democrats, I think they're kind of doing this, and this is really credit to Biden, right? Because this is sort of like his, Yang has pointed this out. This is the magic of Biden, is that everything he says becomes reasonable. So it's just like he's doing this sort of, it's a further left thing than people were really expecting from him, which is great.
Yeah.
But he's able to pitch it in the sense that it's like, no, this is just America.
Right.
This is just being a moderate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that that lane, it widens the possibilities of what you can do politically, because now stuff like paid family leave or even direct cash relief becomes moderate, and that's huge. So yeah,
he absolutely has mainstreamed a lot of things like that otherwise would have been so easy for kind of radical MAGA to kind of say, oh, this is not a real American idea. Like even if Obama had proposed, some of these big infrastructure bills or the big COVID relief stuff, I think the whole socialist label would have stuck further than when someone, frankly, who looks like Joe says it. It's easier for kind of the Amtrak riding Delaware, Pennsylvania white guy to advocate these things.
Unfortunately, that's really true. And that is, because I have seen a lot of like, well, Obama could like, oh, even Obama wasn't as like, ambitious as Biden. Like, well, there's two things going on. Number one, Biden can learn from the mistakes of the Obama-Biden administration because he was the administration. But in addition to that, there is this fact that he's kind of protected by this cloak of white privilege in which, Obama was getting all this hatred and all this suspicion just because of what he looked like. And Biden doesn't have that, challenge that he's up against. And so he is able to do more. And, hopefully stuff like that will change in the next couple of generations at most. But that is the reality right now. So, I mean, obviously, Biden being in the shoes that he's in, run with it. Like, you exploit that as much as you possibly can. Run the ball as far as you can. So, I think that's what he's trying to do.
Well, you'll be happy to know that while we were talking, I just claimed my access to the production diaries.
Nice.
Of the I got myself a yard project.
Thanks,
and when
Tom.
you put me in the credits, you just put Nerds for Humanity in there.
Okay.
So everybody, you can get involved with the documentary for as little as just $5. So you don't have to, for me, I got access to the production diaries for $35. So it's quite a deal. Think about it. James does good work. This is not his first rodeo. This is kind of his day job, is making films.
Yep.
And a lot of us were really excited about the stuff you did about the Yang presidential campaign. And some people even preferred your stuff to the official commercials.
I'm so glad, by the way, that the New York ads have taken a real level, because they hired, Darren Aronofsky to do some stuff, and it's like really shows like, oh yeah, you hired a filmmaker. That's why this is so much better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you think about that presidential. I mean, that was not that was a classic startup team, right? Where there were people who hadn't done it before, and so in a way, I feel like, wow, hats off that they got it that far.
Yeah.
As first timers in a way. And then secondly, you're like, wow, now that he has some combination of seasoned hands and some fresh folks, like that might be just kind of the Cinderella fit, right?
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Well, anything else that we should talk about, James, before we wrap up? Anything you want to share with the audience? Or
so a film that I made 7 years ago, it's called Ezekiel's Landing. It is a sci-fi thriller that I made back in Indiana when I was living there, and I made it for $3,000. So, like I said, definitely come from a micro budget background. That film was my first feature film that I did, and I had a blast making it. And I always felt like I didn't quite really nail it, didn't quite stick the landing in the edit. And so this year I revisited it and I recut the entire film. I remixed it, redid visual effects, all of that. And that is now up online on YouTube, and I am really proud of how much better it is. It is a blast to watch. And so if you love
that by Hoosier Films or no?
No, you want to look for the channel is Valiant Dead.
Okay.
Let me just send you the link real quick directly, and then you can.
I'm on Valiant Dead now. Let me share my screen.
Let me see here.
Hold on. Am I on the right page?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
All
it.
right, hold on. Can we watch the trailer with your permission?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me share it right now. Share screen with audio. Valiant Dead, share audio. Bam. I think it's a special edition, right?
Yep, special edition.
All right. Let's start from the beginning.
So did that play? I didn't see it on my end.
Oh, shit. Son of a gun. Let me ask in the chat. Did you guys see that? That would be funny because I was just enjoying it myself then.
I was just watching your reaction. I was just like, well, he seems to be enjoying it.
Oh, shit. Well, I'll put a link to it in the bottom. I'm pretty sure I said share screen. Let me try it one more time.
Okay.
And worst case scenario, people can see it twice. Let's see here. I think I put it in full screen mode. Maybe that kind of affected us. Hold on a second. You can see it now, right?
I can see it now, yeah.
All right, so let's watch that again.
We on?
Can you hear it?
Yep.
Okay.
We're going to go for it. Ezekiel's landing. Here we come.
Discovering the truth behind the signal might be the closest I ever get to the stars.
I made up the abduction story as a kid so that I wouldn't have to face the truth about my father.
We were abducted by aliens, man.
Possible proof of alien life. I doubt it. It's a gift. It must be accepted.
You know if you see anything weird. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. The actress looking at the camera right as they pull away. It's like, I'm gonna kill this guy. Oh man, so you yeah, I think it's a good example of the kind of production quality of the work that you and your team are capable of doing. And so you think and the documentary, I'm guessing you're going to want to hit similar standards, right? Like make it feel like
It's
something you'd watch on Netflix, you know?
Yeah,
in
exactly.
theory. Yeah.
It's going to be much greater actually than Ezekiel's Landing, since that was 7 years ago. We were just kind of finding our feet as a production crew, and so now, you know, substantially higher production value than what we could do even then. But no, I'm very proud of that film, and I do think it holds up very well. And in the new version, it's even better. So yeah, I'm excited for people to watch that.
Well, congrats, James, and we'll have to have you back when you've sort of put together your first kind of prototype of the mini documentary. maybe we can kind of get the director's commentary on how it came together.
For sure. Yeah, I'll be back to promote it several more times, I'm sure, as we continue to raise money and get things across the finish line. So thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining. Have a great weekend. And with that, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.
Woo! My God, it's intense.